The text for today, most of us are probably familiar with the story. Jesus had been crucified, and Peter was really close to Jesus. For 3 years, he followed him on and off. In the last 18 months, he was with him 24/7, just about. And he even proclaimed his love for Jesus when Jesus was predicted his death. And Peter said, "No, not while I'm on my watch. You know, I'm going to defend you to my dying breath." And it was a short while later, Jesus was being tried and crucified, and Peter denied him 3 times and hid in the shadows. And then after that, Jesus came to see Peter twice before this. Once in the upper room with 9 other disciples, and then the first time, and then this third time, Jesus went to find him. Now, a question I'd like to ask is, when we are lost or confused or hurting, what do we do? I think a lot of us, we fall back on what's comfortable, don't we? We go back to what?
I talked to Jesus a lot that time.
Jesus a lot. You know, for me, some of us, we fall back on our hobbies. You know, we fall back on something that we don't have to think about, just something that we do. Fall back on our hobbies. Me, I like to go off on myself and clear my head, you know, and just kind of get away from it. It doesn't take Jesus long. I mean, here Peter, even after seeing him twice, was still confused, still lost. So what does he do? He goes back to what's familiar to him. He was a fisherman. So he tells these other disciples, these buddies, "I'm going to go fishing. You know, I'm going to get away from this and go fishing." And someone said, "Well, we'll go it." So they're on a fishing boat, been out all night, hadn't caught anything. And then as they're coming back in the morning, because they did most of their fishing at night and use nets, they would come back in the morning, here's this figure standing on the shore, said, "You guys catch anything?" And they're like, "No, nothing yet." You know? "So cast your nets on the other side of the boat." And this happened once before. You know, so they throw their nets in, and they can't get the fish up, they're so heavy, so they're calling other boats over, and somebody says, "Hey, that's Jesus." And as soon as Peter hears that, he takes off his outer garment, he dives in the water, he swims in the shore, and he greets him. I mean, he loves Jesus. And then after a little brief exchange there, then they have breakfast. A curious thing, if you really read the text, is Jesus tells Peter, "Go get some of the fish you caught," but he already had breakfast with him. So he didn't need what Peter had. But he was telling Peter and telling us, "I don't need what you have, but I will use what you have. Bring to me what you have, and I will use it." So they decided to have breakfast, and after breakfast is over, and I'm sure the other disciples and Jesus' friends were there and witnessed this conversation, and Jesus says, "Peter, do you love me?" And I've got a note here that the first 2 times, and this time, Jesus, the word he used, the Greek word he used for love is agapo, or agape. And before we go too further, I want to kind of talk about this word agape, or agapo. It's a love that's called out of one's heart by the preciousness of the object that's loved. It is a love of esteem, of elevation. It has the idea of prizing. Agapo is known as the noblest word for love in the Greek language. So Jesus is asking Peter, "Do you prize me more than these?" Well, what are the these that Jesus is talking about? Well, let's look at what Peter's doing. He's fishing with his buddies. So I would say that Jesus is asking Peter, "Do you value me more than the fish, the boats, the nets? Do you love me more than the companionship of your fellow fishermen, of your friend, your family? Do you love me more than your worldly calling? He's asking us the same thing. Do we love Jesus more than what we are called to do, or what our worldly profession is? Do we love Jesus more than our hobbies? Do we love him more than our family or our friends? After all, Peter thought that his love would never fail. Remember the declaration? I'm going to die on my watch. Do we love Jesus more than our homes? More than our vehicles? Again, more than our jobs, our hobbies? Are we willing to do less of us and more of him? More of what he wants us to do? Well, Peter says, of course you know I love you, Jesus, but it wasn't enough. Jesus asks a second time, Simon, son of John. And that's something else that I'd like to point out. Both, or all three times, he doesn't call him Peter, the rock man. He calls him by his given name, Simon, son of John. To me, that's kind of signifying that he kind of fallen away from that rock man, that he wasn't living up to that rock that Jesus had talked about. And it's not just Peter, it's all of us. We do the same thing. Well, the second time he asks him, says, do you love me more than your smartphones, your iPads, your gaming systems? Do you love me more than your classmates, your teachers, your parents? Peter's response the second time was, yes, Lord, you know I love you. Well, that wasn't enough. Jesus asked him a third time, Peter. Or he didn't say Peter. He said Simon, son of John. Do you love me? But this time it was a little different. I'm sure Peter picked up on it right away, the difference, and the other disciples did too. Instead of agape, Jesus used the Greek word phileo, which is a companionable love. This is a love that speaks of affection, fondness, or liking. Kenneth West says it is a love that is called out of one's heart as a response to the pleasure one takes in a person or object. It's just a pleasure that you get out of being with them. Phileo is the love that responds to kindness, appreciation. It involves giving as well as receiving. But when it is greatly strained, it can collapse in crisis. This is a higher love than eros, which is an erotic love, because it is based on our happiness rather than my happiness. And we see Peter's heart kind of break here, because he knows what Jesus is asking him. Have you lost your affection for me? Have you lost the zeal and excitement that you once had for me? Peter, in his grief, says to Jesus, Lord, you know everything, acknowledging Christ's deity. You know everything. You know that I love you. And Jesus said to him again a third time, he says, feed my sheep. Each time he was telling Peter to take care of his people, to forget about what you did before. I have a higher calling for you. And I think we all have a higher calling. I mean, we all have to have jobs. We have to support our families. We have to take care of ourselves physically. But that's not our calling. I was fortunate enough the last 15 years that I was able to work, but I was in a profession that served God but also fed my family at the same time. And not all of us are fortunate like that. I'm sure Pastor Mike would tell you how fortunate he is to be in a job that he can do what he's passionate about for the Lord and take care of his family. But not all of us are fortunate like this. Some of us have to have jobs. And I pray that each of you enjoy what you do for a living. But it's not your calling. Our calling is what we do for God. Our job should be a means to support our ministries. Feed my sheep. Continue to do the things I have done. Continue to love the way I love. Continue to teach and lead my people. What good is physical feeding if we're not spiritually feeding others? Are we as Christians as in love with Jesus today as we were the first time we met him? Are we as passionate about Christ as we were the day he introduced himself to us? Do we still feel that phileo connection with Jesus? Do we view the world through his eyes? Do we hold on to that companionable love that we share with Jesus? Some of my most heartfelt times are the times that I'm alone with Jesus. Do we have a love that is called out of our heart as a response to the pleasure we take from the person of Jesus Christ and the relationship that we share with him? This, my friend, is God's will for our lives. It's not 10, 20 minutes that we spend listening to a sermon on Sunday morning. It's not in a 1-hour Bible study. These things help. That's not the end all. It's the way we live our lives. If we study Acts chapter 2, we can see that the early Christians, they got it. They lived it. They lived in community with one another. They had meals together. They celebrated communion together. They worshiped together. They served together. They served each other. They served the community. They gave sacrificially to the community. Acts 2 says they sold their belongings and gave to those who had need. And going back to this short encounter with Jesus that Peter had, Jesus was not shaming Peter. He was telling Peter that it's okay to go there once in a while. It's okay to be lost, confused, and hurt. You just can't live there. Who's ever listened to Montel Williams? He says it's okay to go there, you just can't live there. And that's kind of what Jesus is telling Peter. You know, you can go there, you can be lost, confused, but you can't live there. You got to come back to me. You got to get out of the boat and go get to doing the work that I've laid out for you. Well, the last part of the scripture is a subject for another discussion. But I will give you a sneak peek that it didn't end well for Peter, as it didn't end well for most of the disciples. And it may not end well for some of us here. I know it's not ending well for many of our Christian brothers and sisters in other countries right now. But that's not the point. The point is, if we live in Christ,